Welcome to the podcast, Shellie. It's so amazing to have you here, actually. You're all the way across in the UK. I'm on the other side of the world in New Zealand. And yeah, I really appreciate you being here. I've been really inspired by the work I see you do on your social media, on Instagram. I love your reels. They really resonate with regards to the work I do in birth trauma support. And it seems like you're one of these people who really gets it, who understands birthing physiology and what interferes with that physiology and the many things that lead to needless trauma in the birth space. So, but first of all, I would love to have you share with us a bit about how you got into doula work in the first place.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I was just saying to my husband before I came on, how cool it is that I'm having a conversation with somebody completely the other side of the world. It's just so amazing. And I'm sort of so grateful in that way for this technology that came up in the midst of the pandemic, when actually a lot of birth trauma stuff got worse. We also got some things that, sort of came more to light and meant that we could use things a bit more. So there's always a good side in the dark, isn't there? Yeah, becoming a doula, it's one of those funny things that a lot of people ask me that question, and I just think that I was meant to do it. So I fell into doulaing. I was doulaing for many years before I even knew it was a profession or a thing that you could do as work. I think I've always been, that nature nurture thing has guided me towards being a caring empath person since childhood. I had a quite difficult childhood with a lot of childhood trauma, and that the way that my personality intermeshed with those circumstances means that I'm good at listening to people. I try to recognize other people's points of view, and I try to help guide people to come to an understanding why they're feeling the way they're feeling. And I like to look after people, probably because I wasn't that well looked after as a child, and so that's kind of what drives me and makes me feel happy. I'm not somebody who's driven by money. Making lots of money, it's never been an interest of me, and in fact I've tried to curate my lifestyle into such a way that money doesn't have to be a massive priority, because I'm just not driven by it. So hence why I live on a narrowboat, because it's a lot less expensive than living in a house. And I just was always a caring person, and quite a few friends asked me to come to be at their birth and look after them. And I trained out of school. I always thought I was going to be a medic of some sort, even from a tiny age. In fact, I was quite a precocious child, and people like to tell the story of when my sister was born. She had cystic fibrosis and some other medical complications, and I used to have this little book that was like a cardboard book that was the shape of a doctor bag that I carried everywhere, because I thought I was going to be a doctor. And the nurse was said to me, "Oh, I'm just going to listen to your sister's chest with my listeny thing." And I said, "It's not a listeny thing, it's a stethoscope." So I'm afraid I've been exactly the same since I was 1.5 as to where I am now. I have that interest in how the body works, how people work, and just sort of fell into it. And I studied to be an osteopath. I studied osteopathic medicine, osteopathic and naturopathic medicine. That was the degree I went into, and all the while I was doing doulaing without knowing. And it wasn't until quite a few years later, after I'd supported many births and many people in pregnancy and postnatally, that one of my patients was a doula. And I did what most people do and said, "What's a doula? What's that?" And then I was like, "Oh, I've been doing that for years. Oh my gosh, I didn't know I could actually do it as a job. Oh, well, I'd really like to do that." And so I did.
Amazing. Had you had children of your own?
Yeah, I mean, I have a little boy who I had sort of, I suppose he's just coming up for 11. So I really, my first doula baby's coming up for 18 this year. So kind of in the middle. And that probably drove me to learn even more. And I really became interested in breastfeeding with him, and went to a breastfeeding cafe and volunteered there as a, you know, and sort of learned a lot about supporting breastfeeding with people and that postnatal journey. And that really cemented for me, I think, having a baby, the importance of community and support when you have a baby, because we, you know, obviously some people manage to have that and have their family close or have a community around them, but so many of us are really quite isolated. And having that friendship of people going through the same things, feeling the same things, you know, that you're able to message in the middle of the night, oh, God, I'm awake, are you awake? I'm feeling a bit lonely, you know, this is a bit tough, I'm feeling touched out, or whatever it is that you're feeling, and someone else going, me too. You think, oh, I'm not the only one, you know, because you can think that when you're looking on social media and people are posting all these beautiful pictures about how wonderful everything is, and you know, they're so happy, and the tired crying person doesn't get on so much. And I'm really glad that that's happening more, actually, that people are being really raw and honest, because it's a scary thing to do, isn't it, to put that online. But I think it's so helpful for people to understand that you have times where you think this is the most wonderful, amazing thing ever, and you also have times where you think, I feel like a cow, I don't want anyone touching my boobs or being near me or even, you know, stroking me anymore, it's too much, I'm touched out. And so that balance of, you know, of both sides is so helpful. So yeah, I am a mummy of a well, I wanted to free birth. I didn't want to have anybody there. My husband was more nervous because he has older grown-up children who I love very dearly, and he had very difficult experiences with them when they were born, highly medicalized, both turning into crash, so they know, true crash emergency cesareans, and it really traumatized him hugely. And he was very frightened of birth and frightened of having children again. And it was very difficult for him to engage with any kind of learning about physiological birth or anything like that when I was pregnant with Seb. I sort of thrust upon him, well, I don't want anybody there, just you, and I don't need anybody. That's how bodies work. If I need someone, I'll call them. That was basically my attitude. So I sort of thrust him in the deep end a little bit, and continued to force him to help me with the, no, I say that in jest. He absolutely agrees with everything that I'm trying to do to raise awareness and help people understand that your bodies work, and that if people are in your space undermining your confidence, that's not what birth is about. So he likes to help me on social media. It's my reels, bless him.
I think you recently co-opted him with making a reel where he was having a vaginal examination done by you.
Yeah,
right?
Bless him, his hairy knees. Yeah, his hairy knees have featured a couple of times. I think, you know, the kind of things that I'm touching on with a lot of the videos that I'm making, you know, I do a bit of balance, some educational, you know, some quite hard hitting, some really questioning, you know, quite deep and difficult things that are quite challenging, especially for medical professionals, because it's really holding up a light to what people are doing, and a lot to try to help people with things that they might say if they're feeling coerced or pressured by their medical professionals, that is backed up with evidence, so that if they feel they need that evidence to say no, they've got that. And I try to balance the kind of really serious nature of things that we're talking about, you know, really serious trauma here, with a bit of comedy, and you know, making something a little bit tongue-in-cheek, a little bit funny, a little bit, you know, satirical, a kind of satire of things, because I suppose it's my way of coping with trauma. My friend who studies psychodynamic counselling, psychotherapy, she says to me, Shellie, the one of the most complex forms of trauma coping is to use humor. So I take that as a compliment. I know she's trying to poke me. She's trying to poke me to sort things, but I'm like, oh, I'm the most sophisticated. I like that. Which of course is me using humor.
Yeah, I do think it is a fine balancing act and quite a talent to be able to inject humor into serious topics like birth trauma, and you do an amazing job of that, Shellie. Yeah, so take that credit.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand it's really serious, but I think there is so much really serious stuff going on in the world at the moment. There's so much trauma happening, and we are so much more aware of it than we used to be because of social media. You know, we're watching people, children, mothers, innocent people being bombed and dreadful things happening, you know, tortured. You know, it's there all the time. And birth trauma is happening all the time. You know, we've just had this birth trauma inquiry in the UK, which is just, you know, a lot of people were hoping for it to be something that's going to make a really big difference. And you know, to be honest, I knew that it wasn't. It was going to just push the agenda of more medicalization and more hands-on and less physiological birth. But that, you know, that disappointment of that, and the fact that people have shared their stories and become raw and open, and it's ended up being the way that it's ended up. You know, it's a lot to take on, and I don't think you want to come onto social media and see more misery and, you know, stuff all the time. I think you need a bit of a balance, and so it's like a little, you know, poke at, this is not okay, you know, it's not okay, but I don't want to depress everybody and make them really miserable. You know, you want to have a bit of light at the end of the tunnel, so that you can, you know, you can feel okay about these things, or you can think, oh, hold on a second, that happened to me, I want to talk to someone about that, you know, or know that people have a safe space to say, they did that to me, you know, to write in the comments, that happened to me, and for me to say, you know, really, I appreciate you sharing your story here. You know, it's really brave of you to do that. Thank you for doing it. And it means that then when I get somebody coming into the comments saying, well, it's not like that in my hospital, or I don't do that, I say, this is not the space for you to come and say that. Don't diminish what people have come here to share. And if you have a look at the induction rates in your hospital and the cesarean rates in your hospital, and if they're over 5 to 10%, then it is happening in your hospital. Because, you know, when you look at midwifery models of care where you've got continuity of care, like the farm in America, you know, their cesarean rates are under 5% and have been since the 60s.
Yeah.
So this whole coming in saying, well, women are getting older and fatter and unhealthier, and that's why they're having all these problems, it's a lie. It's a completely deluded lie. And I recognize that it's hard to face up to a model that you have put your whole life into, you have studied, you have sacrificed, you've ended up with debts to study to become a midwife or an obstetrician. But that doesn't excuse the trauma that's happening. And I know it's difficult to look when somebody says, look, what you're doing is causing the problem. Yeah, I know the reflex is to, you know, la 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 la, yeah, it's not me, it's women getting older and fat. It's not. It's not people getting more unhealthy. It's the massive increase in intervention that is causing problems, because those of us who support birth in a physiological way are not seeing the horrific outcomes that are being seen in institutions. 50% of the population or more should not be needing major medical intervention. The latest stats in the NHS for last year, nearly 60% of the pregnant population had some major medical intervention, be that induction or augmentation of labour or cesarean to birth their baby.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
Yeah. And just for listeners who may not understand that word, augmentation, that's the like speeding up of labour using synthetic oxytocin. So yes, I'm busy nodding away to everything that you're saying there, Shellie. Though one thing that you did mention was about continuity of midwifery care, like on the farm and in the States, and you know, having those really low intervention rates. We have a continuity of care model in New Zealand. We have done for quite some time now, and I can't say that our birth trauma statistics or intervention rates are much lower at all than other countries who don't have that model of care, you know, which is really, really disappointing. And so we do have some incredible midwives who really honour physiological birthing, really honour a woman's right to choose her path, who completely respect autonomy in birth and really hold that space beautifully for women to be able to birth their way, but that is such a small fraction really of the midwifery population, and so just having
you need
yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, what you need is continuity of care with a true midwife, not continuity of care with an obstetric nurse. Because if somebody's got obstetric thinking, then that's not a midwifery continuity of care model. And the number of true midwives out there is tiny. Just because someone has the title of midwife doesn't mean they understand what being with women actually is. That's the meaning of the word, isn't it? And that's not what I see the vast majority of the time. That's not what my experience of midwives has been. I've obviously met some absolute gems of midwives. I have some people who I consider very good friends who were midwives or maybe still are midwives. I've had a lot of midwifery students come on my courses to understand about physiology and anatomy and biomechanics. That's true midwifery, but they're in the minority, and what they see in their experience is in their minority. I had some midwife students recently, some nearly qualified, some sort of partway through training, and I just said to them, how many physiological births have you seen? None. How many physiological third stages have you seen? None. This should be 95% of the population should be having a physiological birth. And I think the trouble is the medical model does not know what it should be fighting for. Because they never see it. They don't know the difference between a truly supported person birthing in their power to somebody whose power and confidence has been undermined their entire pregnancy. So they're so fearful that the reaction when the baby is there is, oh, thank goodness that's over and we're alive. That shouldn't be what birth is about. It should be, wow, look what I've done. My amazing, I made this person, I birthed this person, we did this together. This is, it makes goosebumps on my arm just thinking about.
You were saying it.
Yeah, and it's so different. It's worlds apart. You cannot compare medicalized birth to somebody birthing physiologically in their power. They're not comparable. They're not even on the same scale. They're nothing alike. And the bare minimum that medicalized birth strives for, an alive mother and baby at the detriment of everything else, I don't think it's worth it. And I think it should be everybody's individual choice. But coercing people and saying, well, your baby might die because there's less than 1 in 1,000 chance that might happen, and there's no signs that it's going to happen. For me to lose that skin bumpy, goosey, amazing feeling, that euphoric, oxytocin boost, all those natural hormones making you fall so deeply in love with your baby, I would risk that less than 1 in 1,000 chance every time over the medicalized, fake hormones, not your natural hormones working, bright lights, people wanting to root around in your vagina every 2 hours or 4 hours or whatever, made up policy it is in a place, and people thinking that they know better than you about your body. It's sad. It makes me sad because it doesn't just affect that moment, that day, or that number of days that it takes for a baby to come. It affects your confidence and your baby's life forever. If you've got synthetic oxytocin in your system, if you've got an epidural in your system, your body does not get the massive peak of oxytocin at the end of that birth that you should get. So that means that your baby's first experience of love is muted. They don't get it. So what does that mean for them? You know, can they have that capacity to fulfill having that massive peak of oxytocin and joy when they're falling in love for the first time? I mean, these are the things that we should really be exploring and understanding, because I think we're transforming humanity as a society in a way that we don't fully understand, on a risk of less than 1%.
Yeah.
For over 50% of the population.
Yeah.
And that's big, you know, that's really serious.
Yeah. And we can't know the long-term impacts on babies, right? Like, these are things we can only kind of guess at, but to ignore the obvious impacts that imprinting is going to have, you know, that, like, just because we can't quantify them or even qualify them, we can't ignore that surely missing out on that vital physiology of, you know, that bonding hormone, and having a mother begin that very difficult journey of learning to parent a newborn when she is in a state of trauma, and there is minimal support for her, you know, like, if any, to get through that time. That is going to impact her relationship with her child, and that is going to impact the child's sense of safety in the world, or, you know, love, belonging, whatever. You know, it's undoubtedly gonna have an impact. So
and on mothers, you know, and mothers are often forgotten, aren't they? You know, the hospital's priority is a live baby, you know, never mind what we do to the mother. Exactly. And this is the thing, the mothers are, or parents, you know, I know not everyone identifies as a mother, but the parenting, you know, this is the person who has birthed a baby is the core of the family, is the person that holds everyone together. And if they've been ripped apart and thrown aside and not cared about, what does, you know, that impacts us in such a massive way. And I see in people the lack of confidence in their ability to parent, because their ability to, you know, to feel what their body needs, to feel what their baby needs, has been undermined every step of the way throughout their pregnancy, before their pregnancy. Well, we don't know if you're pregnant. Oh, well, I'm sorry, we don't go your due dates by when you think you had sex and created this life. We're going to use a machine to tell us. And no, I'm sorry, we don't understand that your baby's okay unless we put this machine on to listen in. We don't take into account the fact that you can feel that everything's okay, you can feel your baby moving. That's not enough for us. It's undermining your confidence in yourself and your own intuition on such a deep fundamental level that I think that people don't recognize how serious that is, you know. And then people go to appointments and they come out and they say, oh, I feel really awful after that appointment. I feel, you know, it's just left me feeling really, I mean, I cried and I feel really this is not what care is. You know, in any other situation, if you went and somebody made you cry, you wouldn't go back. Don't go back, just step out of it, you know. And this massive fear that people have that doctors know best. Doctors do not know better about your body than you. They don't. And they don't know about physiological birth. I think people go in thinking that midwives and doctors are experts in birth, you know, and they're not. You know, the vast majority of them are not, because they do not see physiological birth. Any doctor you see has never seen a home birth unless they've had one themselves, or they're like Dr. Stu from America, who's supported home births, a lot of home births. But other obstetricians don't know it. They don't know what they're undermining with their inductions and their interventions and things like that. They don't know how magical and amazing you feel when you birth your baby in your own power, because they've never seen it. What they know is fear and worry about birth, because they interfere with almost every birth that they come across. And so that's their idea of birth, that thought of it is you know, is continually perpetuated and confirmed. They have a massive confirmation bias of birth being dangerous, and what they don't realize is that the birth is dangerous because of all the interventions that have happened.
Absolutely. And, you know, how can you come to trust birthing physiology if you've never seen it, if you've never witnessed it? Why would you trust it? And like you say, it's the interventions, and they might start off small. They might be those things that you were describing in pregnancy, which undermine, that then when the woman does go into labor, if she manages to avoid being induced in the first place, you know, she has no confidence in herself and no trust in her physiology. She thinks she needs the medical support, the hospital, the you know, maternity care, and I'm using air quotes there around that word care, to be able to safely birth her baby. So, and because the medical system does not appreciate, nor I believe understand in the slightest, I don't think they've ever attempted to learn about it, the very, very clear links between what's going on in our minds and what then happens in our physiology. There is no respect for or appreciation of the impacts of fear on her physiology. So, you know, when a woman is failing to progress in labour, you know, failure to progress is a really common reason for that, you know, augmentation of labour or for a caesarean. Rather than saying, okay, what does she need in order to feel more safe so that her body will work like it's so clearly designed to? I mean, she's a woman, she's a mammal, of course she knows how to birth, you know, like how has the rest of humanity come into the world for all these you know, millennia. So rather than saying to her, you know, how can we support you to feel more safe, what's going on here, they just override and control with their medicine and their machinery, and force her body to open, and force her baby out, and if it doesn't open, then we'll cut the baby out. You know, there's just no appreciation for how important that sense of safety is in birth, and trust. You know, that's part of the feeling safe, is trusting our bodies to be able to do what they're designed to do, and having a team around us who back us up in that belief. And when our trust wavers, when we are in the throes of the really, really gritty bits of labour, you know, we're going through that sort of transition phase, that's when we need our team to say, you can do this, you're doing this, you know, you're doing amazing, you've got this.
Absolutely. But it's more, the thing is, in an institutional setting, it's more difficult to support somebody emotionally than it is to hook them up to a machine and a drip and give them an epidural so they're quiet and compliant and strapped to a bed, and you can just sit and type up all the notes you have to do for the other however many people you're looking after that day, you know, and catch up on your paperwork and silence this woman that was roaring in her power. It's easier because you know, you cannot give yourself emotionally to that many people. There's too many people coming in, it's too much pressure on the staff. So I understand it. And the thing is that birth is designed to test us. You know, it's a rite of passage. Then we're physiologically designed to be really stretched to our limits, to think, I can't do this, and then for the body to carry on and do it anyway, so that we can realize when we're parents, this is really difficult, I can't do this. You've got that innate feeling in you, no, hold on a second, I can, I did that really hard thing, I can do this really hard thing. And taking that away from people is massive. No, you can't do it. Absolutely. What we'll do is give you some medicine to do it, and we'll come and save you. And the thing is,
no, or we won't. We'll just leave you to flounder and suffer and struggle, and you know, the leading cause of maternal deaths in New Zealand, as it is in many other parts of the world, is suicide. What does that tell us about the level of support we are providing, you know, pregnant or new mothers?
Yeah, but you know, in our trauma inquiry recently in the UK, the important thing is to put your hands on people's perineums. That's what they think is going to help reduce trauma. It's not, you know, the evidence shows that the perineal bundle, the OAC bundle, does not really improve outcomes. It actually makes third and fourth degree tears more likely, and makes episiotomies more likely. So even if you're just looking at the aspect of trauma in terms of perineal trauma, never mind the rest of the woman, the solution doesn't help. The solution doesn't improve outcomes, you know. And it's sort of like banging your head against the wall when you get inquiries into trauma, because they just miss the point, you know. And every time they say we should listen to women, and guess what, they don't listen to women ever, really. It just doesn't, you know, that in any situation, and I don't mean, I mean obviously people do listen to women sometimes, but in every situation where something goes wrong, it's because women have not been listened to, pretty much. You know, they say, I feel something's wrong. Okay, yeah, you don't know, just wait, you know, you're in the queue, you know, not going to listen. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested, Shellie, to understand your pathway, I guess, to your awareness around this. So when you said you'd been practicing as a doula, I didn't realize that was what it was called at the time, but that you have been doing doula work really for 7 years before you gave birth to your son. And for you, you know, you said you were planning, I don't know if you actually ended up having a free birth, but that was your vision for your birth, which is quite something, right? Like that says a lot about your understanding of all that we're talking about here at that stage, and you know, 11 years ago. So was that where you were at when you started supporting your friends in birth, when you started doulaing, or how did you kind of come to understand what birth trauma was all about, what was causing it, and what was and wasn't okay that was happening, I guess, within the world of birth, and particularly in the birthing system?
Yeah, well, I think from my childhood, I've always been a person that wants to understand why things happen the way they happen, or why people act the way they act, and I want to try and understand why people behave certain ways, or why things work certain ways in bodies or don't work certain ways in bodies. And that's why I ended up studying osteopathic and naturopathic medicine rather than allopathic medicine, because I did work experience with a doctor and with an osteopath and with a vet, and some other things as well. And I realized that medicine wasn't what I thought it was. And I think a lot of people are still under the illusion that medicine is something that is not something that they think it is, if that makes sense. In that I thought that being a doctor meant that you were caring for people, that you were supporting people, that you were forming relationship with people to understand where their problems are coming from, and then to help them to get over those, you know, help them to resolve those, or help to support them in those if they're kind of long-term chronic conditions. And it was just a sort of like a pivotal 2 moments that happened when I was doing that work experience as a teenager, when someone came to the doctor and said, I'm getting these headaches, and you know, they've got 3 minutes or whatever, and the doctor was just like, well, take some paracetamol, what are you doing bothering me, kind of thing. And the osteopath that I was shadowing was when someone came for a headache, and it was just so fortuitous that it was the same thing, because you know, at the time I was quite young, so I'm not sure I would have got it if it had been different things, but it just like bing, this kind of light bulb moment. Oh, okay, so what's your work setup like? Okay, you're on a computer. Have you had your eyes tested recently? Okay, what level is your computer at? What are you doing with are you know, sort of, you know, how are you sitting, you know, like understanding what's your pillow like, how's your bed, you know, are you driving a lot, are you under a lot of stress? Let's talk about what's happening in your life. And having this half an hour or 45-minute appointment or whatever it was, I can't remember how long that particular person worked with, to understand where this issue was coming from, you know, to give the person tools to help prevent the problem in the future, and to put hands on that person to feel where there were things that weren't feeling quite right, to do some touch therapy, you know, of whatever kind, and I think different kinds work for different people, so that you were getting to the root cause of the problem and trying to resolve it, rather than trying to cover it up with medication, or cover it up with, you know, lip service, like we see a lot with kind of how to deal with emotional things that people are coming up with. And so I think that kind of way of thinking extended into understanding birth and doulaing. And I taught at the university that I studied at. They asked me to come back to teach when I was in my second year there. And, you know, watching how people learn and seeing students, you know, when students were struggling, if they come to me and say, I'm not doing well, you know, I don't understand. And I said, what you need to do is understand why. Because if you understand why something's happening, you can figure out a solution. You know, so rather than just thinking, well, this person's got pain in X point, and then I look through my notes and I know that X and X can cause that pain, and then I do this treatment. Which treatment is it? Oh, I've got to like kind of bring all the pieces together. You know, if you start with, why is that happening? What is that person doing to make that happen? What is happening in their body to make that happen? Because it might not be something they're doing, it might be a functional structural issue. Then you can try to work out a solution how to resolve it. And so I approached birth in the same way. So at the start, when I was supporting those births a long time ago, I didn't know really anything about birth physiology. I hadn't studied it. I didn't really know anything about the anatomy of birth. It's a constant learning process. Every birth I go to, I learn something new, whether it's something about myself, something about people, something about birth. Every time I come away, you know, especially when I support people who are vulnerable, and so I tend to see more abusive stuff in the system. You know, if you are other, you know, if you're not a white middle class person, the treatment that you get is very different. And even when you've got a white middle class person stood next to you supporting you, you know, it doesn't seem to negate that happening. And so, you know, you learn new things. You learn, okay, at every birth from now on, I'm going to write down everybody's name who comes into the room, because I know I'm terrible at remembering names, and that way I've got a note of it for later should the person that I'm supporting want to say anything about how they were treated, you know. Or I recognize that people do a lot of this. What can I do to try to negate that? Or I notice people act a certain way like this, and this seems to help some people, so I can offer that to other people to see if that helps them. You know, with each thing you're sort of building this idea of how you can help people in the best way, and that you have things to offer, not that you have things to do to people, but you have things to offer if you see something that's looking a little bit similar that maybe you can help with. And you know, we have this innate design of nature of our bodies, and you know, we see animals having babies without the problems that humans have, and we have this arrogance as humans that we think we know better. You know, we're the dominant species. We think we know better. We think we know better than nature, even when we don't actually fully understand nature. And this arrogance is causing us a lot of trouble. You know, the arrogance of people, and it's a societal thing, isn't it? You know, we used to live in a matriarchal society where the wisdom of the elders was respected. Now the vast majority of us live in a patriarchal, industrialized society where what is respected is the people in power, the people who've got degrees, the people who've got letters after their name, not the wisdom of the elderly who have lived and learned and understood, but the wisdom of people who have the most money, who have the most power, who have the most influence. And it's a different way of being, and it's not, I don't think it's serving us. I really don't think it's serving us, because when you've got somebody saying, well, I know better than you about your own body, that's not how it should be. You can have someone who's looked after a lot of bodies and said, well, I've seen this in a lot of bodies, and I wonder how that might feel for you. What do you think? Mm-hmm. It's very different.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it feels very different for the person. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I suppose that's how my thinking comes.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful, and just something I want to add on, I guess, to you describing the ways in which women are undermined in their own body knowledge and body wisdom during their pregnancies, during their births, by a system of maternity care that says that the doctors know best, the medicine or technology is more accurate tool to utilize to understand what's going on with you and your pregnancy and your baby and whatnot, rather than what you believe about what's going on or what you know is going on. I mean, you used an example that I use a lot of, which is there are women who know their cycles inside out. They know to the day when they conceived, and they know when their their estimated due date is, and then they go along for their first maternity care appointment, and lo and behold, they're sent off for a dating scan. Like what what's up with that? Like, how much more undermining and patronizing can we get? But anyway, the point I was going to make was that this doesn't start in pregnancy. This starts from when we are small children, particularly girls, growing up in a culture that says that authority figures know better than we do what's best for us, and not to question that authority, and that our body, to tune out to our body messages, right? Like you use the example of, you've got a headache, well, take a Panadol, rather than saying, what is my body trying to tell me here? Oh yeah, I haven't had a drink all day, like I'm dehydrated, or I've been go I need a rest. You're on the heaviest day of your period, and yes, you have to go to school, yes, you have to do PE. It's rather than, yeah, your body's asking you to rest, to slow down. So there's just countless ways we are encouraged to not listen to our body's messages, to override them, not trust body wisdom. Another example that I talk about a lot is the use of paracetamol with little children who have fevers, and the fever is our body's very intelligent way of trying to kill off the pathogens, the bugs, and here we go overriding that body wisdom by giving paracetamol, which brings the temperature down, so presumably prolonging the illness, because the bugs are going to hang around longer if they're not being killed off with heat. So yeah. So this is, I've come to sort of see this as, like, I call it grooming. It's a form of grooming, that we are groomed to be compliant in the birth space from day dot, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I sound like a kind of crazy conspiracy theorist when I say things like this, but absolutely, because powerful women who birth in their power, who realize how amazing they are, do not contribute well to an industrialized society where the white men in suits at the top want to be in control. And the more that women are controlled, and that their powerful attributes are squashed, are minimized, are vilified, the better. And it has been happening for centuries, and is continuing to happen. And if you speak out against it, you're portrayed as being fringe or witchy, and I say, just because they're not burning the witches with fire anymore, they're still trying to burn people who call out this thing, who say, you have been being made to be compliant since you were a child. Don't go into pregnancy and expect to be in a difficult situation where your hormones are pushing you, and the things that are happening in your body are pushing you to the edge of your limits and beyond. Don't then expect to be able to fight out against the man in the white suit telling you this is what you need to do, if you haven't been able to do it the rest of your life. It's not it's not likely to happen. you know, because your body's innate protective mechanisms, your fight, flight, fawn, fear responses will kick in. And I know you will see it so often. You have people going, why did I say yes to that? I didn't want that. I didn't want it. And then laying the blame on themselves that they didn't say no. Absolutely. When actually they've been groomed their entire lives to do what they're told.
Yeah, not only that, but if we kind of understand what's happening in that sort of trauma brain, you know, when women are in a state of trauma where there's those power dynamics happening in the birth space and they are feeling fearful and etc., and they've kind of gone into this state of fight or flight, and of course they can't fight or flee. They're often, you know, strapped down to a hospital bed or have an epidural in place, and it's just not possible. Then they will go into some sort of freeze states or fawning behavior, and when you are there, you do not have access to that thinking part of your brain. The prefrontal cortex is shut down. You're in survival mode. And so you don't actually have the ability, because that part of your brain is what's responsible for rational thought, for, you know, formulating questions, for language, for being able to say no, or I need some time to think about this, or hang on, can you explain this to me a bit more? I don't understand. That requires you to have access to your thinking brain. And if you're in a state of trauma, you cannot access that. And this is one of the big concerns I have, is that, you know, we tell women they have the right to choose. They have the right to say no to interventions. They have the right to, you know, the informed consent process being respected. But enacting that right is literally impossible for a lot of women. And even when it is tried to be enacted, you know, like, which is kind of rare in the birth space, right? Like, there is just this overriding of these rights in many ways. But yeah,
it's because you've got the wrong people in your birth space. Yeah. And what, you know, though we've been taught and educated, the right people to have in your birth space are doctors. The right place to be is the hospital. It's not, and it has never been. And if you actually look at the research, since the beginning of obstetrician, the invention of obstetricians, the muscling in of men into women's spaces, they've had worse outcomes. It hasn't changed. The outcomes have not got better. You still will have better outcomes with true midwifery, with women-led care, than you will in an institutionalized setting. Hands down, every time, unless you have something that needs to be medically managed, which should be a very small percentage of the population. And if all the women that are well and don't need all of this medical intervention weren't in the medical setting, then the medical setting would be able to care better for the people that need that medical care, and then hopefully give more true informed consent and care. Yeah, and people have got to, you know, we've got to take responsibility for ourselves, because the institution does not have our best interests at heart. It has never had our best interests at heart, and it never will. They pay lip service to saying they're going to listen to women and do things, but anytime there's a model of care that starts to empower women and starts to have good birth outcomes, it's shut down, you know, at the first hint of anything that could happen anywhere. And all the time it's home birth is dangerous, you know, babies can die. We don't look at all the babies that are dying in a hospital and say hospital birth is dangerous. It doesn't happen. It's swept under the carpet. It's hushed. It's, oh, well, things like that happen in a hospital. So no, unfortunately, death is a part of life, and we are always going to sadly lose babies. I wish that we didn't, because obviously it is the most awful thing that can happen, but it is always going to happen. And in the guise of trying to prevent it from happening, what we're doing is traumatizing so many of the population. And I know the figures say 1/3 of people that go into a birth situation feel traumatized by some aspect of their care. That is underestimating it massively. I know it's underestimating it massively, and even that is hideous. Can you imagine any other walk of life where you're like, oh, I'm just going into this shop, oh, don't, you know, you wouldn't go in there if you said 1/3 of people that go in there end up traumatized.
Yeah.
So just don't go in there. Just step away from it, because you can't guarantee who you're going to get. You can't guarantee that the person is going to be respectful of your autonomy. And I'm really sad to say that in the 17, 18 years that I have been doing this, I have met one midwife who truly gave informed consent, was with women, and didn't do something against what the person wanted. One. And that was the midwife that came to my birth that my husband called because he panicked when I started mooing like a cow. And she was only there for 15 minutes before my baby came out, so she didn't really have a chance to do anything. But she was very respectful and was hands off, didn't touch me, didn't do anything, and, you know, was helped reassure my husband, which is what he needed. So that, it's really damning. I know that's a really damning thing to say, and I'm not saying I haven't met midwives out of that situation who I know and work with and liaise with and things like that that do give respectful care, but I have not seen it in anyone who I've worked with in the NHS setting for the entire time. They might do a bit of informed consent for one bit, but then it'll be something else, and sometimes it's something little, you know, but a lot of the time it's something big, like not taking your hands out when somebody says stop during a vaginal examination, or sweeping the cervix without asking for permission, or hanging a bag of Syntocin on without saying to the mother, I'm going to hang this now, is that okay with you? Do you understand? Do you have any questions? And actually not even telling the truth that, oh, it's just a bag of saline. That's funny, it says Syntocin on the back of it. That's artificial oxytocin, isn't it? That's not saline.
Wow, you've
this stuff. I see it all the time. And so when people come into my comments on Instagram and go, "Oh, we're not like that in a hospital," I know it's a lie, and it makes me quite mad. I try not to be like annoyed, and I know on social media we all tend to be. It's a bit like being a car, isn't it? That you sort of beep at people and get annoyed because you've got that kind of separation. So you can be quite feisty back with people, maybe often even without intending to be that way, because you've got to understand there's a person at the other end of the keyboard. But I just don't want to tolerate that kind of nonsense. You know, when I've had a registered nurse in my comments on Instagram. So it was a video that's for some reason went absolutely mad and has seen, I think nearly 2 million people have watched it. And it was a video about using artificial oxytocin for the third stage for the birth of the placenta, and the character in the video saying, well, no, everything's fine, I don't think I want that, and the medical professional going, well, I'm just going to do it, you know, kind of interrupting that space. And actually it's really important not to be disturbed in that time, and for you to just be bonding with your baby to allow the safe birth of the placenta, and that's not respected in medical settings as far as I've seen it the entire time, really. You know, questions and let me give you leaflets about safe sleeping and talk and lights up and It's like, no, we need quiet, dark, calm, mother and baby to be undisturbed. That's what makes it safe and stops there being hemorrhage and things like that. So anyway, this video went massively wide, and I had a registered nurse come in the comments say that I was worse than Hitler. Doulas are worse than Hitler. And I said, I'm sorry, you're saying that doulas are worse than a genocidal maniac who tortured and murdered brutally thousands and thousands of people. And I thought maybe that would make her think that perhaps her comment wasn't okay or justified. And she doubled down. She said, yes, worse than Hitler. I'm really glad my hospital doesn't allow doulas.
What?
Because I was talking about giving people informed consent and allowing women to say, no, I don't want that medication, I'm fine, everything's okay here, I'm happy.
Yeah, and that makes you somehow you know, an evil dictator, and for supporting women's right to choose.
Yeah. And that's and saying that publicly with their name on social media, I just think, wow, the bullying, the kind of feeling that you can be a dictator yourself so brazenly is okay, that's fine. Doesn't fear for her job, doesn't fear for anything. And this is the thing, you know, in a hospital setting, exactly the same. Well, I'm just going to do a sweep without asking. What are they going to do about it? Nothing's going to happen. You know, it's technically in the eyes of the law assault, but has anyone ever been charged for assault? No. Does it ever happen? Not that I'm aware of, because then you're left traumatized trying to care for a newborn, which is all consuming, you know, 24 hours a day on very little sleep. You're trying to deal with the trauma, you're trying to be a mother and be loving and caring to your baby and all that sort of thing. You don't have time to make a complaint, really. And when people do in the UK, the complaints process is an absolute nightmare. It's horribly re-triggering. And when you go for a birth debrief, it's about covering the backside of the hospital and, you know, and justifying the abuse that has happened so that they don't get sued. It's like this kind of placating thing, not what we're doing is absolutely not okay, we need to change it, we shouldn't be doing that. It's the missing the point, much like with this recent trauma report, just missing the point. You know?
Yeah, and that's if women leave the birth space understanding that what happened to them wasn't actually okay, because I think a lot of people are duped into believing that it's just as well. I was in the hospital and had all that, you know, amazing care and, you know, yes, it was traumatizing, but they saved my baby from my faulty body, you know. I need to be grateful. And I think when you said that you're confident that more than 1 in 3 women experience birth as traumatic, I couldn't agree more. And I think that, you know, we are only tip of the iceberg in terms of a societal appreciation for and understanding of what birth trauma is and what's causing it. And so I think a lot of people are coming out of their births traumatized, but they don't realize that this is not how you are supposed to feel. This is not how you are supposed to feel when you meet your baby. This is not how you're supposed to feel in the early weeks postpartum, you know, and you are not supposed to have PTSD, flashbacks, nightmares, you know, ongoing anxiety, in relation to your birth experience. That is not how we have been designed to experience birth. In fact, birth is inherently designed to be a safe, rewarding, and efficient process, you know, rewarding process. We are supposed to, like you described earlier, come out the other side of birth going like, hell yeah, look at me, you know, look at what I'm capable of, look at what I can do, look at what happens when I listen to my body, when I listen to my instincts and my intuition. And that's what we need in order to be able to trust ourselves, back ourselves when our baby needs us to respond to its cues. And we've never done this thing before, but hey, we just did that amazing thing, like pushing that baby or growing that baby, right? Like growing that baby in our bodies. We didn't have to do a thing. Our bodies are amazing. We are amazing. And then I push that baby out through my vagina like, hell yeah, I can do anything, you know, I've got this. That's what we're designed to experience. And at birth, like, you know, that oxytocin, when we're flooded with that at the time of birth, you know, it's a love drug. And you're a doula, you'll know, as a ex-home birth midwife, that was part of the addiction of attending births, was just absorbing all this oxytocin that was in the atmosphere at the time of birth. We'd leave those births and drive home and just be on a high ourselves, you know. That is how babies are supposed to be met in birth, and that is how we are supposed to come into parenthood, is feeling amazing. Yes, like you know, we've just like run a marathon, but amazing and elated and on an absolute high.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel sad that for people working in an institution that don't get that, it's really sad. I mean, it's a tragedy for everybody in that birth space. And you know, and a kind of automatic hatred of doulas because they're challenging things that don't feel right in a space, because they're questioning things that makes you feel uncomfortable. You know, not being able to lean into that and thinking, well, maybe this person has something here. You know, I always say to my students that in an institutional setting, you've got this massive hierarchy, you know, who's at the top, and everyone's fearful of them and does what they say, and it goes down and down and down. And, you know, women and then their partners, and then the doulas are right at the bottom in this terms of this hierarchy. You know, I would say we're the poo on the bottom of the shoe, basically, in terms of the hierarchy. And there's no thought to, maybe I can learn something from this person. It doesn't happen often. It's happened once to me, and it was an absolutely amazing experience that a pediatrician came in for a birth that I was attending. Because there was quite significant meconium and the baby had some breathing issues. And he came in the room, and it was a COVID time, and he said, who are you? And I said, I'm Shellie, I'm a doula, I'm here to support the mum. And the baby was off, you know, at the resuscité, and I was talking the mum through, saying that they're just checking the baby's breathing's okay. If he's well enough, he's going to come back to you, and just reassuring. I said, I know there's a lot of people in the room, they're all here to do a job to help you and your baby be safe. Just keeping it calm whilst everyone's like running around like headless chickens. And this pediatrician said, why is this baby not with the mother? Why is he over here? His breathing is fine. He needs to go back to the mother. And he said, you've got an expert in this room. There she is. And he pointed at me, which I couldn't believe. He said, I've never seen a doula before. You're like a mythical creature. I'm really excited to see you. And he said, give that baby back to that mother. Get it skin to skin. Watch this woman support her to feed her baby how it should be. And he made the whole team, who were very annoyed by the looks on their faces, facilitate the facilitation of a breast crawl, so the baby could crawl to the breast and feed, and the mother breastfeed her baby. And it was, I mean, I've never experienced anything like it. It was absolutely amazing that he made them all watch and just said, stop your flapping, you know, watch what should be happening here, and gave credit to the physiology in the room, which was, I mean, it's left me stunned. It was years ago now, but it sort of left me stunned. And I just think if we all had reverence for the people's skills in the room, the people's roles in the room, it would make it so much more lovely for everybody. You know, the person that is birthing in that room, they are the goddess, and we are their servants to help them feel safe, to help them feel loved, adored, you know, that we are in awe of the struggles that they're going through, because birth is a struggle. It's designed to be a struggle. You know, we've got these fluctuations of hormones where, you know, our oxytocin and our endorphins are coming up, so we're floating off to, you know, bring our babies to us from the ether, or however you want to see it. But, you know, it's helping us cope with those sensations. Then we've got these peaks of adrenaline where we're suddenly like reaching out. Am I safe? Is this a safe space to have my baby? And if the people around you are emanating safety, you can go back into that, fall back into that hormonal drive that is helping you to be safe. If you look out and everybody's panicking, or everyone's going, do you want some pain relief? Should we get you an epidural? You're making a lot of noise. You know, let's put an epidural in, then you'll be quiet. You know, you'll be quiet. Birth isn't meant to be quiet unless the person who's birthing feels like they want to be quiet. It's meant to be whatever that person feels they need, you know. And what the role of people caring in that space is to make that person feel how amazing they are. You know, birth is just this phenomenal, amazing thing. And it's just the medical thing, it undermines it, you know, it knocks that confidence. It's I know better than you. No, you can't push now. What do you mean you feel you need to push? I need to put my fingers in your vagina to check that you can push. Nobody's putting their fingers in any bears' vaginas. Nobody's going up to a wolf and going, oh, excuse me, I just need to check your cervix to see if you're ready to birth. You know, we don't need fingers in vaginas. You know, they're helpful only really when you in your body think, I'm feeling something's not quite right. It's going to be helpful if we have a bit more information. We can get some information with an internal examination to see maybe which way is the baby facing, so that we can understand, do I need to move in a particular way to work with my baby to birth? You know, doesn't matter how many centimeters your cervix is dilated. The
Mm-hmm.
evidence shows it doesn't matter how many centimeters your cervix is dilated, and it undermines your confidence, it disrupts your flow, it usually puts you in an awkward, difficult, painful position because, you know, midwives often don't have the skills, or in fact they're told off, they're disciplined if they do a vaginal exam in a position where the woman's comfortable, like on all fours or in a pool. And it's absolute crazy. It's absolute craziness. The point is always missed.
Yeah.
This person birthing is life. They're the portal to life, and they should be revered and honoured in that space, and whatever they need to feel supported and held so that they can do what they are made to do. That's our role.
Mm-hmm. I love this description of a doula's role, of a birth worker's role. Can you share your thoughts on advocacy in the birth space? We sort of talked a little bit earlier about the sometimes inability of women to be able to ask questions, you know, to advocate for themselves. And my personal opinion on this is that nobody should be having to advocate for themselves when they are birthing a baby. You know, they have enough to be dealing with, and we should be doing our all as their support people to keep them in the zone, to keep them in that, you know, otherworldly sort of space they've entered, and only draw them out of that if there's very, very good reason to be doing so. So I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are on, as a doula, your role in terms of advocacy.
Yeah, so I think that role has changed over the time of being a doula, both with things that I've learned over the time, but also with how the environment of institutional birthing has changed, especially since COVID, and it's really the coercive nature of things and the fear has ramped up. In my opinion, things were like starting to improve in the UK, and we were starting to see the sort of increase in home birth, and you know, they were kind of trying to lean towards more continuity of care models and stuff like that, and then it was just so I would say now, as a doula, I am very blunt with people that I'm looking after, and I say these are the stats of what you're thinking about your birth. So I want you to really think about what you want for your birth. What do you want? So if somebody wants a physiological birth, you know, they may not. So they may want a surgical birth, or they may want all the machines and things, and which is fine. So I will support whatever they want. But if somebody wants a physiological birth, I will just be very blunt and say, hospital is not the place to have a physiological birth if that's what you want. It's not facilitated there, it's not understood there, and it's not what most people end up with.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to have a physiological birth, these are the things that you can do to help support your physiology. Let's talk about what your fears are. If people have fears around home birth, because often they do, they're what if. Okay, let's discuss all those what ifs. Let's put plans in place for those what ifs. You know, let's understand that those what ifs are less than a 1 in 1,000 chance, or whatever they are, you know, so that you can understand how small they are. But if it's still there, let's work out why it's there. Let's work out why that thought is there. So that's the biggest part of advocacy. So if I'm working with a family from, you know, quite early on in pregnancy, or even before pregnancy, or I'm talking to someone who's thinking about birth but they're nervous about it, that's what I talk about. That how physiology works, how to support it best, and that it is so important to only have people in your environment that are going to facilitate that. So that means that if you are intending to use a national health service and you can't guarantee who's going to be in your birth space, maybe look into, is it safer to not have anybody in your birth space? Is it safer just to, if you're feeling that you're coping fine and everything's going okay, just to have your baby? And then when your baby's out, if you still feel okay, wait a little bit longer. If your placenta comes out and you feel fine and everything's okay, just enjoy those cuddles, enjoy that feed, and then go, oh, we've had a baby, could you send someone round to do whatever necessary checks and registrations need to be done? Okay, but if any point you think, I need somebody in my space to help me feel safer, then you can invite them into your space. And I say that about me as well. You know, I say to my clients, your body is designed to birth. You don't need anybody else there. Okay, you can birth without anybody there. You can birth, if you were unconscious, your body would birth your baby. If you were in a coma, you don't need even yourself to be present in that moment, but it is an amazing wild ride to be present and feel that and fall into that feeling, you know, feel that amazing power in your body. It's one of the most, you know, just mind-blowing things that you will ever experience in your life. But when you feel that you need someone to help you feel safe and calm, call them. And if you choose to birth at home, it's not a sword that you have to sacrifice yourself on. Yeah, if at any point you think, this doesn't feel right, I feel like I need the machines that go beep and the men in white coats around me actually to feel safe, then you just go to hospital. But a hospital, I would say hospitals like Hotel California, which probably shows my age, and a lot of young people won't know what that is now, but it's a song. It's a good song, go listen to it. But once you check in, you can't leave. Yeah, it's really difficult to then back away from that. So if you start out with the intention of as little as possible and whatever supports physiology, and build up, and this is what I teach my students in, you know, understanding biomechanics as well, that you can learn all these techniques to help babies to move and reposition and things like that. But actually, if physiology is working, if the anatomy and the physiology in the body are balanced before you get to birth, you're not going to need all the techniques. You're not going to need to know them, and they are an intervention. You know, they're not physiology, they're an intervention as well. So they should only be used if they're needed. Yeah, so it's always less is more. So that if you've got that understanding, you're then, how do I support the physiology best in this moment? How do I support the anatomy best in this moment? Okay, do the minimum. Maybe it's somebody just needs a sip of water. Maybe we just need to turn the lights out. Maybe we need to put their favorite music on, or say, oh, are you feeling a bit much? What can we do to help you feel calm? Maybe you like a soft touch massage. Well, let's put the aromatherapy diffuser on with that lovely smell that you were smelling when you were listening to your relaxation tracks, just to help bring that calmness back. You know, escalating up to whatever is needed to help that baby be birth safe. And sometimes that's a cesarean. But if you've done everything that you can to get to the point that maybe is the thing that the person least wants to do, they can come out at the end and think, we did everything. And we tried everything, and that was what needed to happen. Okay, and then you can support the person in that, because sometimes babies get stuck in awkward positions, and well, no matter what you do, you can't get them out. They're so wedged that the only way is to have a cesarean. But if you know that you have done everything and you've tried everything, and it was just one of those things, that leaves you very emotionally differently feeling about your birth experience at the end to someone saying, you're failing to progress. I'm going to save you by cutting your baby out.
Your baby was too big, your pelvis was too small, you know, this whole narrative of you were faulty.
It's yours or your baby's fault. Is you know, you either blame mother or you blame the baby. Definitely never blame the institution and all the things that they've done that have caused the issue in the first place. And
look, if we had more time, I would love to dive into a conversation with you, perhaps another podcast episode if you're willing, around induction of labour, because this is the biggest bee I have in my bonnet since you know, over the decade-long experience I've had of working in birth trauma support. The majority of the stories I'm hearing, the labours begin with an induction of labour, and I hear of all of the risks, you know, the harm that is caused by this intervention that is done in the name of safety. Your baby is going to be safer if we induce. So the mum, of course, she wants, more than anybody, wants a safe outcome for her baby. So okay, I'll have an induction. And B, they are not told of any of the risks. They're not told about what the process is likely to look like, feel like, result in. And so they are just, like steered down this horror path,
Yeah.
and are clueless that that's what they're entering. They're just led to believe they're going to get to meet their baby sooner. Awesome, like, yay, I can, plan my day around when my baby's going to arrive, and I don't have to suffer any more of this waiting patiently for my baby to come, or this heaviness, or whatever. Little do they know just what a nightmare experience induction of labour is for so many women. And I know that you're doing a lot of work into this at the moment. You're writing, I don't know, is it a book, or what are you coming up with?
Well, I'm not really sure. I think it might be like a booklet type of thing. I was wondering about a book, and I don't know, somehow looking at book templates and trying to publish and stuff like that just doesn't fill me with joy. So I'm currently kind of writing a booklet type of thing. I want it to look nice and pretty, and to have images of birth on there, all different types of birth, and to have information about physiology, about induction, about the reasons that are given for induction, and to have evidence links as to why it may or may not be helpful, evidence to show that maybe there is no evidence, because often it's we're going to induce you for X reason, and actually when you look at the evidence, there is no evidence that induction improves outcomes, and that's for a lot of the situations where it's being told. So I wanted to create a kind of resource for people, both for people who are pregnant and for birth workers as well, doulas, and maybe midwives and obstetricians. Maybe they might want to read it, I don't know, so that people have a resource that they can dip into and say, okay, well, I've been told that I need to have an induction for a big baby. What's the information about that? And also to have information that if somebody chooses to have an induction, what that's going to look like, what the different methods are, what the risks and the benefits of each different method is, what the process may look like, and understanding that actually when you are told you're being put on an induction process, number one, that you can say no. Number two, that you can say no to any aspect of that induction, because often it's like, well, you've signed up for this, so then you get this, that, and the other. It's like, well, actually, it's your body. Their intention may be to dilate your cervix enough, rupture your waters, give you an epidural, or give you syntocinon. But you can say, oh, okay, well, actually, I'm happy to maybe have an artificial rupture of membranes, but then I want to wait and see what happens. Or maybe you have some syntocinon and you say, or artificial oxytocin, and say, well, okay, what do you start off as the minimum dose? Okay, I just want to stay at that for a while and see what happens. I want to turn it off now and have a break so that I can have a rest. People aren't told that they can do things like this, but it's your body. You can choose what you want. So I'm trying to create a resource that has this information in, so that people can understand, like you say, a bit more what they're walking into and what they can do themselves to prepare for that. So the part that I'm working towards at the end, I'm sort of doing all the reasons why people are told they need induction at the moment, and I've read over 100 papers, medical papers now in the last couple of months, to try and get the information consolidated in an easy to read way for people. But I want to go on to tools that you can have if you choose that induction is right for you, because I think people should only be going into it if they've actually explored all their options and thought, this is the option that I want to do. Then what can you do to make it a better experience? So what can you do to help balance your body? What movements and things that you can do to help balance your anatomy? What can you do to understand how to promote your own physiology in the process? Because you will still produce your own oxytocin even alongside the artificial oxytocin. It's not as much and in the same kind of ratios, but you can still make those protective hormones happen in the process if you've got the tools to understand how to do that. So I want to incorporate that as well. And I mean, I already have resources online from lectures that I've done. I call them bite-sized birth lectures, and also I filmed like a birth ball flow, like movements that really help to balance the body and the pelvis to help a baby to get into the right position for labour to start naturally. but also to set up everything so that you are stacking all the cards in your favor to have a better experience that isn't done. You know, it's not done in a medical. It's just like, come in, let's see what your cervix is telling us, and that's all we look at. You know, we're not looking at how the rest of the body is balanced, how the mind is balanced. You know, to have relaxation tools that are relevant to an induction. You know, because often a lot of hypnobirthing tracks are about natural birthing, and actually I want to record and have things that can help specifically in an induction process, because, you know, in a lot of trusts now, half of people who are pregnant are going through this, and I think it's unrealistic to expect that people are going to be able to say no, because of all the things we've talked about, all that grooming, all that fear around birth, all that I've got to listen to what the doctor says because they tell me my baby's going to die if I don't, even though it's not true, and even though you know in your mind and in your instinct it's not true, that leads to that trauma afterwards. But it's unrealistic to expect people to be able to say no a lot of the time. So I want people to have tools to feel like if they're saying yes, it's because they want to say yes, and that if they say yes because they feel pressured into it, that they're doing everything they can to make it the most amazing experience that it can be for them. You know, that they feel held and loved, and, you know, that they've done, like we were saying, if you feel like you've done everything you could, then it's less traumatizing, you know, whatever happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, that's so true. And it sounds like that will be an amazing resource. Yeah, and if only all women who were saying yes to an induction were doing so from an informed place, you know, I do think it would make a world of difference. When you're informed and you kind of have a bit of an idea of what to expect, and you have some information around how to navigate this different way of you know, of labour starting, then already that mind body stuff is going to be helpful. You said that you can still produce your own oxytocin even when you have synthetic oxytocin being delivered intravenously. Yes, if you're not in a state of trauma. If you're in a state of trauma, you are producing stress hormones, you're not producing love hormones. So so yeah, awesome. And as you were sharing that, like I said, you know, so many of the stories I hear the labours start with medical induction. And one story that I heard last year that stands out is just such a blatant disregard for a woman's right to make an informed choice around this. The mum was 40, pregnant with her first baby, and because she was of advanced maternal age, you know, she was told when she went to her obstetric referral appointment that he said that she was going to be induced at 39 weeks because of her age. And I said to her, so what did they explain about your age that meant that justified, you know, an induction at 39 weeks? And she said they didn't. They just said that if you're over 35, then you get induced at 39 weeks. That was the extent of her informed consent process. And she had a 4-day induction that was just horrific, you know. And it's like, how on earth can anybody justify saying that that is a safer way for her to bring her baby into the world? You know, like these blanket rules that apply, instead of going, okay, so she's 40, it doesn't mean she's any less healthy or capable or whatever than that 25-year-old that, you know, you supported to birth her baby the other week or whatever, you know, like, it's just like, what?
Yeah, it's absolute madness. The reasons for induction are just, you know, a very good friend of mine, Sam Gadsden, she runs a fantastic support groups on Facebook, the Home Birth Support Group UK. which is just an amazing resource. And people can join from all over the world, but there's so many people that are intending to home birth or free birth in there. So many stories of people's births, and it's unedited. There's no sugarcoating or covering of people's experiences in there. So people who are intending home birth, who end up with cesareans, who end up with inductions, all of the stories are in there. So it's a really wonderful place to join if you want to know about birth and see people's experiences. And there's lovely peer support, and there's lots of doulas in there and everything. It's a great resource. She says, yeah, the reason for induction is the day of the week has a Y in it. And it absolutely hits the nail on the head. Any excuse to induce people, and I think it's because the induction process is what they're used to in an institutionalized setting. It suits the conveyor belt well, because you are controlling women, you're having them strapped down with a CTG, you're usually giving them an epidural, so they're quiet in a bed, they're compliant, they're then in the process and they've got medication going in, so you have the authority to say, well, there's medicine in there now, so we're controlling this birth. It's out of your control, so you need to do what we say. You need to consent to these examinations. You need to, we're just putting this medication in now, we're just doing this, I'm just turning this up, or not even telling you. And it suits that conveyor belt of care. When you are a wild, free woman that your baby decides to come into the world, usually things start in the middle of the night because our oxytocin and melatonin are working synergistically. That's kind of awkward for a hospital system. Yeah. Someone coming in, and no, I don't want to lie on the bed. I want to stand up and move. I want to cuddle my husband and dance. I want to roar my baby out. That's not convenient for the medical institution. And so yes, any excuse. I mean, I told a story the other night on part of the Physiological Birth Club, which is on the Clubhouse app. I don't know if you can get that in New Zealand, but that's another great resource where people can come, and we have a lot of people on a panel, and we talk about physiological birth and discuss different topics, and it's like a kind of stage team, but it's on Clubhouse. And I forgot what I was going to say. We were talking about it the other day, and I spoke about a birth that I attended recently, and I was called in at the last minute, so I didn't know the person that I was supporting, a vulnerable person. And this person had just gone to the hospital because she'd felt some discomfort. She just wanted to check. She was quite nervous about her baby being safe. Everything was fine. They'd done a CTG check. They said, oh, everything's fine, the baby's fine, but you're here, so we might as well give you an induction. They didn't give her any idea of what it would be like for her or her baby, or any of the side effects or anything like that. For everybody, they didn't say to her, it's going to make it likely that you're going to need an epidural. None of that. And by the time I'd got there, they'd already started the process. She was in a lot of discomfort. The baby was back to back. Her waters had ruptured following an examination, but it wasn't meant to be an arm, but it had happened, and her baby was back to back, and so it makes it much more difficult for a baby to then turn when the waters have gone biomechanically. She was so terrified that anything bad was going to happen to her baby, she didn't want to move or do anything, and it just ended up in this cascade of epidural, basically without proper consent, because she was asking questions and wanted to understand, and they were like, no, the anaesthetist actually said, we give everybody epidurals. I mean, a lot of people have epidurals here, and it was really telling about the state of that particular hospital. And the mother was like, yes, but what about the side effect? Oh no, there's you've got this sheet here that says it's a 1 in 10,000 risk or whatever that you're going to have nerve damage. No mention of anything with babies and what happens to babies. No, the baby's fine, we give them to all the the mothers and the babies, so it doesn't affect them. Just lying. And the anaesthetist basically like, look, I've got 4 women waiting for epidurals, I don't have time to talk to you anymore about it. Do you want it or not? You either have it now, or you probably wait 4 hours, or maybe you won't get one. So that was the informed consent process for her. So she was causing a lot of discomfort, and so had the epidural. And then it was a cascade of more awful stuff that happened and ended in a cesarean. So yeah, it's easy, like understanding what may happen is really helpful. And the thing is, sometimes people have inductions and they work really well. When the body is ready to go into labor, and you're just on the edge, the induction process can just tip you over the edge, and that process happen. And I think so. It's important to say there's a scale. They're not always horrific nightmares, and sometimes an induction is the best option for whatever reason, and it might just be for an emotional reason for the mother, and that's okay. You know, it might be there are some medical reasons where actually induction probably is the best course of action, like in uncontrolled preeclampsia, you know, because an anesthetic tends to be more dangerous in that situation because the blood pressure is difficult to control. And in my experience, when people have those kind of situations, actually inductions usually work very quickly and very easily, and it just happens. But when you are, for no good reason, trying to force a body to birth a baby when the baby and the mother are not ready, it's an extremely difficult process for them both, physically, emotionally, and has knock-on effects for the ability of the person to breastfeed, ability to cope with looking after a baby and care for a baby, and how people feel about what was done to them and their experience that they have for the rest of their life. So it's not a decision to be taken lightly, and people having information to understand the depth of what making that decision means, I think, is helpful. And then people can take or leave what they want, but if they don't have the option to understand, then that is no option, and it's definitely not informed consent. So
yeah, yes, I'm feeling like I need to start to wrap our chat up, Shellie.
I talk too much, I'm sorry.
I could just, you know, talk with you all night, all day for you, all night for me, because yeah, just everything that you're saying is the world I'm experiencing over here as a birth trauma support worker. But yeah, just something I kind of wanted, I guess, to end on for listeners. You before, when I was asking about the role of advocacy as a doula, you said essentially that happens in pregnancy, right? This is about helping women to understand what it is that they need to know in order to choose wisely where and with whom they give birth, because their birth environment and the people in it are going to be the most impactful aspects as to whether they feel safe in their birth process. That, and I also would add trust in their own physiology. And I think the bit that I kind of wanted to add is that I concur that the work needs to happen before birth, right? Like so that we are not in a situation where we are having to advocate for ourselves in birth, because we've explored some different ideas, we've talked about the what ifs, we've come up with some plans, and we've really come to trust ourselves, our bodies, our ability to birth. We have learned about the ways that we can support our physiology. Our support team understand that as well, and then it happens. So I've over the last maybe 2 years, I've started running a kind of like an antenatal series, a pregnancy series I call Soulful Birth. And this, you know, I'm sure I've never attended mainstream antenatal classes, but I can guarantee it is nothing like mainstream.
Yeah, grooming for medical procedures, I think.
Yeah,
grooming for medical procedures and being compliant and doing what you're told. Yeah, that's what, you know, and there's evidence to show that, isn't there, that if an antenatal education is associated with an institution, it does not prepare you for birth in a way that an independent one does. So, you know, if you're considering, anybody listening, considering antenatal education, do not take the antenatal education that is offered by your institution. I mean, you can take it, but also please go outside to someone who is not affiliated with a medical institution, because they are far more likely to tell you the truth and give you the tools to equip you to navigate that system if you're choosing to be in it in the best way that you possibly can, but also to give you tools to maybe think, I'm not sure I want to step in that institution, actually. I'm going to step outside it and do something different and amazing.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and so much of what I talk about in that in those classes, they're not classes, I guess they are, but you know, like in those sessions is you know, and I say from the get-go, like, I can teach you some things, but actually you're going to get as much out of this as you put into it, because the bulk of the work is about you exploring your beliefs, where they stemmed from. Are you a people pleaser? How can you start to set boundaries for yourself if you're not used to doing that? You know, are you practicing saying no when you're very much been used to being a people pleaser, you know, a yes sort of person? You know, practicing communication, just delving into your fears around birth, where have they come from, and you know, what do you need to dive more deeply into or learn more about to understand that you are beautifully designed to birth your baby without the need for this outside interference. And coming back to like listening to our bodies and noticing when our bodies are speaking to us or our babies are speaking to us, like listening for those intuitive hits, like and acting on them, trusting them. And the more we do that, the more we develop our ability to do that, and the more our bodies will speak to us. And you know, this takes work, and it takes concerted effort and time, and it's like that is the work of you know, that we need to do in order to prepare ourselves for the birth that us and our babies need and deserve.
Yeah, and not just the birth, but the parenthood that
Yes.
our children and babies deserve. Because if we're reflecting on how we're feeling, how we're acting in stressful situations, how we're reacting in those situations, and we can sit with those feelings, we can sit with that discomfort, we can explore it and understand it, it makes you so much a better parent and helps the future generation. You know, everyone focuses on the birth when they're pregnant because it's this big thing that we've never done before and it's scary. But this is a snapshot in time, a very important snapshot in time. And that preparation sets you up for the rest of your life as a parent, with the confidence, with that ability to, you know, when you're getting triggered or upset by something, to sit with that and think, where is that coming from? What need in me is not being met? What do I need to change in my life so that I can feel happier and more confident and more comfortable? Because that means you can then do that for your children, which is just the most amazing gift that you can give to yourself, to your family. And you are worth it. You are worth more than peeing on a stick and doing what the machine says and listening to a beep. You are worth exploring what feels good and wonderful and nourishing for you through your pregnancy and through the rest of your life. And the tools that you learn from antenatal education that is delving into that is helping you to discover yourself is just, it's priceless. It's priceless. It's so important. It's so important. And, you know, it's just, yeah, a gift that you can give, that gives to yourself, but gives to everybody else around you, and you're worth it. So definitely do it.
Shellie, you've talked a little bit as we've been talking about the training that you do, or the clubhouse kind of. Can you share with listeners what work you do, what you offer, what, like, if they're going, oh yeah, I want to get in touch, or I want to find out more about what Shellie does, what's available, especially if they're not somebody who lives near you and are never going to use your doula services, how else can they learn from you?
Yeah, well, I actually do remote doula services as well as in person. And actually, there's recently been some research about how effective that is, which is really nice to know, because you know, we felt it was helpful over the pandemic when, you know, we were sort of barred from hospitals and supporting people over the phone and via Zoom and stuff like that. And a lot of the things I do are over Zoom. So I talk to people all over the world who want to have time with me. So I offer consultations over Zoom. People can just get in touch with me. So on Instagram, I'm at the Serenity Doula, and my website is theserenitydoula.co.uk, and my email is Shellie@theserenitydoula.co.uk. So you can get in touch with me any of those ways. So yeah, I offer Zooms one-to-one to talk through anything. So I have people who want to chat with me about getting pregnant. They're not even pregnant, but they're wanting to talk about it and understand it more. I get people wanting information antenatally in pregnancy. I look after people over the phone remotely whilst they're having babies. I've just done that recently for an absolutely beautiful couple who were free birthing their baby and just wanted I worked with a gorgeous doula, and we were there on the end of the phone if they needed us, if they felt they needed us. The quick call, is this okay? Is this normal? Absolutely fine. You're doing brilliant. And then they did it absolutely amazing. I mean, it just fills me. It makes me tear up. I'm so happy for them. So yeah, I offer that kind of thing. I've spoken to people all over the world, so I'll chat to anyone about birth or any questions that people have. I sometimes was doing them monthly, but actually it was just a lot of work, and I'm focusing more on finishing, or like not finishing, even getting through this big project that I have on induction at the moment. It takes a lot of reading and a lot of time because I want to make something that's really worth it for people. So I was doing monthly lectures, but all the monthly lectures that I did and the resources are available either from my website or from my Instagram. You can click a link through, so all the previous lectures that I've done with the materials are available for people to listen to. I wrote a birthing biomechanics course with my background in osteopathic medicine. I'm sort of interested in that. So I have an online course available, which people can listen to and understand about the anatomy and physiology of birth. I do in-person courses. At the moment, I've just been traveling around the UK, but maybe I could travel to other countries. That would be cool. So that's like a combination of some online learning of lectures that I've recorded, and also an in-person day. And it's always lovely. Just get a gorgeous group of birth keepers together, and everyone brings a little something for the table, and we share a meal and we share stories and we talk about all the births that we've been at, and we learn how to move the body in ways that's going to help. And I love doing those. They're really great fun. I've just recently joined the team for the Physiological Birth Club, which is on an app called Clubhouse, and so that's every Tuesday evening in term time, and it's got an amazing team of people who are just really passionate about physiological birth. It's run by Kemi Birth Joy Johnson. And so we just discuss birth, and there's like a stage team and an audience, so people can listen in and then they can ask to come up to the stage and share their stories, and just exploring different aspects. And all of those are recorded, so and they're a great resource for information. So if you're thinking, I want to know more something about it, have a look on the Birth Club app, because there may well be an episode on there for you. So that's what I'm doing at the moment, and then I'm working on this booklet plus videos, resources, things about induction. It's a long-term project. It's the biggest thing that I've ever done. It's going to take me the longest time, and I'm trying to motivate myself to make sure that I get up every day and read a paper or listen to a podcast or learn something, so that I can work on that, because I want to get it out as soon as I can, to help people in that kind of situation. So I think that's me in a nutshell, really. I do in-person doulaing as well, but maybe not in New Zealand. It's probably a bit far. But
yes, yeah. I'll put those links that you shared in the show notes as well. So if people are wanting to touch base with you, they can nice and easily. And I want to just express my gratitude for you coming and sharing your wisdom, your expertise, your knowledge here with my listeners tonight. Amazing, or this morning for you. And I would love to jump on a podcast with you again if you're open to it once you've finished your induction write up, because that's a topic that I would really like to explore on a podcast episode in and of itself, just by itself, because it's huge.
Sure, no, I'd absolutely love to. It'd be my honor. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you for being here.